Why did Our Lady of Guadalupe appear to Juan Diego there in Tepeyac in Cactus Rock in 1531? Why, 10 years before that, does it seem like heaven sent Hernan Cortez and the conquistadors to defeat the Aztec Empire to pave the way for the coming of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which would lead to the millions of conversions to the one holy Catholic and Apostolic faith? Oh yeah, it seems like Hernan was sent. I want to share something with you today that you might not have ever heard before. And you should never forget what I'm about to tell you, especially today on the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below. I don't know if you have this book in your collection. If not, you should. Our Lady of Guadalupe and the Conquest of Darkness by Warren Carroll. Super easy to read. It's not even that big. It is one of my favorites, and I'm going to put a link to it below for you to check out. I'm also going to be linking to a stack of other books that I think you ought to read because all of them provide some key critical information about this very subject. If you want actual resources from that particular time, I can't encourage you enough to read Bernal Diaz's Conquest of New Spain. He was there with Hernan Cortez, firsthand eyewitness. But these other books, especially this one, Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy, published by Sophia Institute Press, fantastic book. I'm going to link to it, and I'll come back to that last one at the end. But this one here is arguably my favorite to read on the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe every single year. And I do want to share a piece of it with you today. Not all of it, just a little tidbit, just a teaser and a taster for you. Again, I'll link to it. Warren Carroll, God rest his soul, founder of Christendom College and a historian, he gives us an insight in chapter 1. If you don't read anything else, just read chapter 1. He describes the world of the Aztecs and he describes the world of Spain and how these two worlds contrast each other prior to their collision there in the 16th century. He describes the priests offering so many sacrificial victims at the temples in all of the towns of the Aztec Empire. He describes them to the point where you can smell the disgusting dried blood from their victims that emanates from their hair, from their clothes, from their whole bodies, that they never washed. They never trimmed themselves. The description is incredibly detailed. He even talks about the number of victims every year. Warren Carroll says at these Aztec tribal temples where they offer to the hummingbird wizard amongst other demons, the hummingbird wizard being Satan himself, in all of these little towns, says every year, and there were 371 subject towns in Aztec Empire. Though not all of them had full-scale temples, there were many other sacrifices as well. The total number was at least 50,000 a year, probably much more. The early Mexican historian, whose name there's no way possibility of me ever actually getting correct, so I'll just spare you of that, estimated that 1 out of every 5 children in Mexico was sacrificed. It is known that entire tribes, numbering in the tens of thousands, were on several occasions exterminated by sacrifices. They had buildings built with the skulls of their victims. This cannot be understated enough. And I do want to share with you a little bit about a particular man who played a key and pivotal role in how this world of the sacrificial victims became commonplace in the Aztec Empire. There were sacrifices of humans before 1487. But in 1487, something happened that changed the game and upped the ante in the worship of the devil himself in his keep there at Cactus Rock, in what would be called Mexico City someday. There was a man named Tlacael. Now, I know I'm not getting his name correct. You can get the book. You can read it for yourself. Tlacael, he was the architect of the Aztec Empire. And I want to share with you this little segment from Warren Carroll's book. I think it's worth a read for you to better understand what was happening when Hernan Cortez showed up at the shores. He wasn't the first, but boy, did he make the biggest impact. Tlachtli was the architect of the Aztec Empire. He developed and carried out the plan of cementing that empire by a regular tribute of victims for human sacrifice, and by requiring that all Mexican nobility attend the great sacrifices, and that all Mexican warriors take prisoners deliberately for sacrifice. In the conquest of New Spain, Bernal Diaz, in his book, I've got it over here, I'm going to link to it below, he talks about how they were on many occasions attacked, overwhelmed, 10-to-1 odds or more. And the Aztecs, they would try to capture you on the battlefield, not kill you, so that you could be offered as a victim on top of their temples, their pyramids. He goes on. And by requiring that all Mexican nobility attend the great sacrifices, that all Mexican warriors take prisoners deliberately for sacrifice. For this purpose, he invented the flower wars, fake conflicts among allies whose sole purpose was to obtain sacrificial victims who would be, for the hummingbird wizard, Satan himself, like bread hot from the griddle, soft and delicious. Tlachtli's answer to every military reverse and natural calamity, there was a series of climatic disasters from 1451 to 1454, and it was greatly to increase the number of sacrificial victims. Tlachtli was born in the same year as the first emperor Montezuma, in 1398. He emerged as a leader through success in war at the age of 31 in 1429. He remained the power behind the throne for the rest of his life, passed over for emperor in 1440 in favor of Montezuma. In a last spasm of resistance to his developing policy to rule by mass human sacrifice, though Montezuma did support that, Tlachtli picked the next 3 emperors while declining the throne himself because, as he said, I am already king. He lived to be 98 years old and effectively ruled the Aztec Empire for 67 years. You never heard of that guy, did you? Tlachtli. Well, in 1487, he wanted to inaugurate, to consecrate, if you will, the temple, the Aztec temple in Mexico City in Cactus Rock, the tallest of all the pyramid temples in the Aztec Empire, well over 100 feet tall. There were steps on each side. The base of that pyramid was a zoo of sorts, a garden sanctuary with animals. On the top of that base, they would offer the sacrifices of their victims. Let me read just a little bit to you that you'll understand what it was like. It says, the sacrificial victim came down the roads to the steps. They lined them up in a line, and they climbed those steps in a line, one by one, climbed up the steps to the platform at the top, and there were bent backwards over large convex slabs of polished stone by a hook around the neck, wielded by a priest with head and arms stained black, never cut black hair, all caked and matted with dried blood, and once white garments soaked and stained with the innumerable gouts of crimson. An immense knife with a blade of midnight black volcanic glass rose and fell, cutting the victim open. His heart was torn out while still beating and held up for all to see, while his ravaged body was kicked over the edge of the temple platform, where it bounced and slithered in obscene contortions down the steps to the bottom, 100 feet below. Later, the limbs of the body were eaten. But not before. The priest did take the limbs and they did eat them. They were cannibals. But not before the animals got their piece as well. It's a reverse on the Garden of Eden, because that's what Satan does. He is an ape of God, and he took a photo negative of the garden paradise, and he established it there at Cactus Rock in Mexico, where he was worshipped day and night with human sacrifices. It's a tragedy. But in 1487, when Tlachtli wanted to consecrate the greatest temple in the Aztec Empire, there at Cactus Rock, Mexico City, he lined up a special series of victims, not just your average offering, but way above average. 80,000 victims prepared for just the consecration of this temple. And I want to read that to you, the description of that day in 1487. This comes from Warren Carroll's quoting R.C. Padden in his description directly verbatim in the book, and I'm going to read Padden's description to you from Warren Carroll. He says, well before daybreak of the opening day, legionnaires prepared the victims, who were put in close single file down the steps of the Great Pyramid, through the city, out over the causeways, and as far as the eye could see. For the average person viewing the spectacle from his rooftop, it would appear that the victims stretched in lines to the ends of the earth. The bulk of the unfortunates were from hostile provinces and the swollen ranks of slavery. On the pyramid's summit, 4 slabs had been set up, one at the head of each staircase, for Tlacael and the 3 kings of the Triple Alliance, all of whom were to begin the affair as sacrificial priests. All were in readiness. The lines of victims were strung out for miles, with great reservoirs at their ends, thousands of trapped humans milling about like cattle, awaiting their turn in line that was about to move. Suddenly, the brilliant, arrayed kings appeared on the platform, and silence fell over the city. Together they approached the Hummingbird Wizard's chapel and made reverent obeisance. As they turned to join their aides at the 4 slabs, great snakeskin drums began to throb, announcing that the lines could now begin to move. Snakeskin drums! Does that not sound appropriate for the worship of the Hummingbird Wizard, Satan himself, the great Nahash, the ancient serpent, the red dragon of Revelation chapter 12? Who can only ape God? Snakeskin drums beating and throbbing as the lines begin to move. Warren Carroll goes on. Relays of priests dispatched the victims. As each group tried, others of thousands who were to live below in the new temple stepped forward to relieve them and keep up the pace. Years of practice had given them a skill and a speed almost incredible. Reliable evidence indicates that it took only 15 seconds to kill each victim. Blood and bodies cascaded in an endless stream down the temple steps. Hearts were assembled in piles and skulls in racks. It went on for 4 days and 4 nights. More than 80,000 men were killed. Tlacael had commanded all the high nobility of Mexico to be present, watching from scented, rose-covered boxes. But eventually the bonds of custom and even of fear were burst by overwhelming horror, and most of the spectators fled, along with many of the people of the city. Even those who could hide from the sight of what was happening were unable any longer to endure the stench. But Tlacael, at 89, remained to the very end, watching the victims killed at 15 seconds per man until the last of the 80,000 had their hearts torn out before his devouring eyes. It would be a hardy soul who would undertake to make a catalog of all the horrors of history and try to make many comparisons among them. But still, no scene after the Passion of Christ would seem to have quite so good a claim to be the worst of all as this one in Mexico City in the year 1487. In the year 1487, just to the north, was a young 13-year-old who would one day be baptized Juan Diego. Did he hear the snakeskin drumbeat? Did he go and watch out of some sort of curiosity, the horror show, the blood, the bodies, the piles, the cannibalism? How is it that an 89-year-old man can, for 4 days, without sleep or rest, stand there to ensure that 80,000 victims, from the first to the very last, 4 days and 4 nights, be offered up to the devil himself in his keep there at Cactus Rock. Hernan Cortez would describe through Bernal Diaz's words the disgust that he had the very first instant he saw the human sacrifices in Mexico, in the Aztec Empire, and how much he was motivated at all cost, even if it cost every single life in his company, to destroy the hummingbird wizard and to put an end to human sacrifices. It was not gold that motivated Hernan Cortez, at least not primarily. It was destroying the devil there and converting these people. And he would convert thousands to his cause, to his side. Thousands of the natives would come and fight alongside him against the Aztec Empire and to overthrow them, because they too were sick of being utterly destroyed by the Aztec Empire. I want to link to this, but I want to share one last thing with you today. I'm going to link to these books, but this one here, this is also a more recent book, The Devil's Best Trick, How the Face of Evil Disappeared by Randall Sullivan. I'll put a link to this below as well, because Randall is a journalist. He wrote for Rolling Stone for many years. And he went to Mexico, and he went and he saw firsthand that in Mexico today, they are offering, the cartels are offering human sacrifices as well as animal sacrifices to the hummingbird wizard yet again. It's happening again today. The Lord once used an imperfect person in Hernan Cortez to defeat the Aztecs and the hummingbird wizard, paving the way for Our Lady of Guadalupe to appear to Juan Diego, which paved the way to millions converting. In fact, this book right here gives us some great insight into that history of the Indians of New Spain by Motolinia. I'll link to that in the description. Would that she do that again today. Let us never forget why Our Lady came. Let us never forget the world of the Aztec Empire. Let us never pretend as though that it is somehow okay. Let us remind ourselves that we are in deep need of conversion again today, that we need Our Lady of Guadalupe more today than ever before. May Our Lady of Guadalupe pray and intercede for us. Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.